I fell madly in love with this guy, but sadly I had to leave him because when he showed me his Instagram, it looked very poorly organized. At 2 in the morning, I was looking at Pablo's Instagram with the same face a person looks at their food, but still tries to eat it because they already paid. My chest was tight with rage, not for him, but for the aesthetic shame that was splashing onto me. I felt betrayed as if he had introduced me to his mom in torn pajamas without warning me. The worst part is that he was happy, proud, as if that disaster were an achievement. And yes, I know how it sounds, but let me explain when all this started. I met Pablo in a coffee shop that seems designed by Pinterest. One of those where even the ice looks expensive and people talk quietly as if they were in a museum. He ordered the simplest thing in the world and still looked attractive with that calm of a man who doesn't question anything because life has gone well for him without effort. I liked that at the beginning, I admit, because I live in alert mode and his energy was like a clean nap. We started talking and there wasn't that uncomfortable tension of first dates. He had conversation, he laughed heartily, and didn't try to impress me with made-up stories. It seemed strange to me, almost suspicious, that someone could be so normal and at the same time so handsome. I'm not one to fall in love for crumbs, and even less for words, but Pablo had something that gave me real peace. He wrote me good morning without playing hard to get. He arrived on time, and when we walked he didn't go 2 steps ahead, as if I were a backpack. He looked me straight in the eye and asked me specific things. Not that generic questionnaire of what do you like to do. That for me is quality attention, and I take it seriously. In my head the movie was forming that I had finally found someone who wasn't going to waste my time. And when I get excited, it's not soft. I go all in and with an exact idea of how things should look. Besides, I have a personal brand, even if people laugh when I say it. I'm not world famous, but I have my aesthetic, my photos, my colors, my way of presenting myself, and that's not superficiality. That's coherence. I take care of my image because no one takes care of it for me, and because nowadays the first impression lives on a screen. Pablo at first fit perfectly into that narrative. He seemed like the type of man who looks good next to a clean gel without needing to try. Tall, nice smile, nice hands, and that vibe that he could be the boyfriend in a soft life carousel. I was already imagining our photos as if they were a campaign, not for interest, but because when something is beautiful it's shared. The first few weeks were too easy, and that made me nervous because I always feel that if there's no tension something is cooking underneath. He wanted quiet plans. I gave him quiet plans, and still I felt I needed a little spark to make sure he was alive. He brought me flowers for no reason, and I told myself that finally a man who understands, even though I hadn't told him I liked them. He invited me to walk and touched my back carefully, as if I were something delicate, and I loved that more than I should admit. I was letting myself be loved, but I was also taking mental notes, because I don't let go of control that easily. And on each date, I evaluated if he could sustain the level of emotional and visual life I need. Because yes, I need a standard, and I'm not going to apologize for it. I'm not talking about money or gifts. I'm talking about presence, good taste, not being embarrassing. There are people who believe that love is pure feeling, but love is also context, and the context today is digital, even if it burns them. I upload stories, tag, share moments, and if my partner appears, they should add, not subtract. When I show you, I'm integrating you into my world, and that's a privilege, not an obligation. Pablo seemed to understand when I told him affectionately that a photo with bad lighting isn't posted. He laughed and told me I was intense, but he said it as if he liked it, as if my intensity made him feel special. One day, after a date that went too well, I asked for his Instagram. It wasn't an interrogation, it was the normal, natural, obvious thing in this era, and more so if you're already dating someone seriously. He showed it to me with complete confidence, like someone showing a picture of their pet and expecting applause. I opened the profile and the world suddenly became ugly. I felt a physical discomfort, like when you enter a house with a weird smell and pretend nothing is wrong so as not to be rude. That's when I understood that the piece Pablo gave me came with an aesthetic debt I hadn't seen. His feed was a public disgrace, and I say this with emotional responsibility. It had pixelated photos of the dog at impossible angles, very old memes that looked like they were found in a 2014 Facebook folder, and selfies with yellow light that made him look sick. I stared as if it were an unpunished crime. It wasn't just disorder, it was abandonment, it was lack of judgment, It was the digital equivalent of going to a wedding with dirty shoes. And the worst part is that he didn't see it. He was comfortable there, as if aesthetics were a whim of mine and not a form of basic self-respect. I tried to react calmly, because it's one thing to have standards and another to humiliate someone you supposedly care about. I told him with a smile that we could improve that I could help him organize it, that it was even fun to do a cleanup. In my mind, I was already designing his profile as if it were a couple's project, something intimate, something of construction. I explained to him that a photo in golden hour works miracles, that a coherent filter isn't falsehood, it's identity, that captions also communicate. He listened to me, but with that face of a man who thinks that what you love is a weird hobby. And when he told me that social media isn't real life, I felt he was speaking to me from a poor mentality, as if my world were invented and his were the real thing. That phrase bothered me more than it should have, because it wasn't just an opinion, it was an invalidation. I build things on the internet. I work on my presence. I take care of my narrative, and not out of vanity, but for survival. For him to minimize it was as if he were telling me that everything of mine was a game. I tried to explain that it's not about living for Instagram. It's about not looking sloppy when people look you up. I told him I couldn't tag him if his feed ruined my color palette, and I said it half-jokingly, but it was also true. He laughed as if I were exaggerating and told me I was too much, that if I liked him his profile shouldn't matter to me, and that's when something inside me lit up, because of course I like him. But I also like myself, and I'm not going to betray myself for a man who doesn't understand the basics. I went home with that feeling of dating someone who lives in another century. I spent hours reviewing his profile as if looking more would give me an explanation, as if at some point I would find a hidden logic. But it wasn't just disorder and neglect, like a teenager's room, only in public version. I thought about how easy it would be to fix it, how good it would look with a couple of decent photos, what we could project together. And at the same time my blood boiled for the simple fact that he didn't even want to try. Because when a woman tells you, "I'll help you," it's not control, it's investment. We saw each other again, and the topic came up again, because I can't pretend something doesn't exist when it's screaming in my face. I proposed a plan, something simple, a casual photo session, no stress, just walking and capturing moments with good light. He told me he didn't want our relationship to become a project, that he was already fine as he was. That answer gave me a mixture of sadness and disgust, because it sounded like conformity, and conformity is contagious. I told him it's not about changing who you are, it's about presenting what you already are better. He crossed his arms and repeated that real life was outside, not in an app. And I thought, perfect, if real life is outside, then I'll stay outside, away from that embarrassment. The decision was quick, because I don't negotiate with things that are essential to me. I told him we needed compatible visual vibes, that my energy couldn't sustain that incoherence. He stared at me as if I were a joke, and that was the last thing I tolerated. He told me it was a shame I was so superficial, that I was losing a good man over photos. I replied that I wasn't losing anything, that I was taking care of my image and my peace, and that a good man also understands the world he lives in. I left with my head held high, but inside with that ugly rage of when you know you're right, and it still hurts. During the following days, Pablo acted as if nothing had happened, as if breaking up were a formality and I was going to regret it. I saw him in my notifications from time to time, because even though I left him, I'm not one to delete people immediately. I need to observe the impact. In fact, I wanted him to feel the void, to understand that my presence elevated his life, even if he didn't value it. But then, 2 weeks later, I saw something that changed the temperature of my body. His photo came up in someone else's story, and there he was smiling. No longer with me, but with Katia, a micro-influencer that I follow, and who's always trying to look bigger than she is. I froze, not from normal jealousy, but from that indignation that my intuition is always right. He wasn't anti-social media, he was anti-my control. I went to his profile with the venomous curiosity of someone who tells herself she's just looking. And what I saw made me want to break my phone. His Instagram was no longer that pixelated dump, it was something else. Photos with VSCO-type golden filters, poetic captions as if he were a deep man. The change was so obvious that it seemed made with a manual, and that offended me personally, because that aesthetic was my vision. It was what I tried to build, and now she was reaping the results as if it were her idea. I felt like something that can't be registered was being stolen from me, as if a song I composed had been taken from me and someone else was singing it on a stage. And that's when I understood that this wasn't just an ex. It was a project being snatched from me in my face. I had a silent rage attack of those that leave you smiling on the outside and planning on the inside. Because of course Pablo can improve, no one denies it, but you're not going to use me as a stepping stone to then show off with another. I was the one who saw the potential. I was the one who explained it to him. I was the one who had the patience to try. And now Katia appears with her smile of I did it all, and Pablo delighted, as if he had always been like that. That for me is a lack of respect, and I don't stay still when I'm disrespected. I won't deny that it hurt me, but the pain turned into something more dangerous, wounded pride. I couldn't allow him to become aesthetic thanks to her, as if my influence didn't exist. I couldn't allow that narrative to settle, because on the internet stories become true through repetition. If he was going to be a curated version, it was going to be on my terms, or it wasn't going to be anything. And at that moment, with the shiny feed in front of my eyes and the feeling that the credit for my own vision was being taken from me, I decided that if I couldn't have him with me, at least I was going to make sure he didn't shine peacefully without paying the price. Comments from the main story. Anonymous user 1 says, so, you ended a relationship because the guy had memes from 2014 and selfies with yellow light. And on top of that you think you're a muse, because you told him that Golden Hour exists is not a personal brand. It's that you're obsessed with everything looking like a catalog. The most ironic thing is that Pablo was divine in person, but you prefer a nice feed to a real life, literally what he told you. And now you're bitter because another girl took a decent photo of him and you feel robbed. What's secondhand embarrassment? Opie's response. Secondhand embarrassment gives me people who live as if the world doesn't see them and then are surprised when they're treated as careless. I didn't say I don't care about what's real. I said that what's real is taken care of and respected. If for you it's normal to tag someone who ruins your aesthetic and also lowers your level, congratulations on your mediocre standard. And the muse thing wasn't my invention. The change was too obvious. Don't come telling me it was a coincidence. They're not going to erase me from a story I started. Anonymous user I says, what you call compatible visual vibes sounds like you want an accessory boyfriend, not a person. On top of that you're indignant because the guy improves with another. I mean, wasn't that what you wanted? You offered to educate him as if he were a puppy. And when he said no, you dumped him and now it hurts you that he didn't obey you. That's not love, it's control. And you top it off by saying you're going to ruin him if it's not on your terms. How sick. Opie's response. Of course, because improving with someone else always looks very romantic from the outside. But no one talks about the emotional work one does before the opportunist arrives to take the photo with the result. I didn't want an accessory, I wanted coherence. But it seems that you all love to romanticize carelessness as if it were personality. And I didn't dump him for not obeying. I left him because he minimized me, because he spoke to me as if what I do doesn't matter. If you stay where they invalidate you, that's your problem. Don't ask me to applaud in gratitude. Update 1. It's been 3 days since the last update, and although it sounds ridiculous, I haven't had a single day of mental silence since I saw that renewed feed. I told myself I didn't care, that I had already left him for a reason, that it wasn't my problem if he now played at being a poet with pretty photos, but every time I opened Instagram there he was, as if the algorithm knew exactly where to poke me. I couldn't sleep well, and not because I missed him as a person, but because the idea that he was rebranding himself without acknowledging where the idea came from burned me. And when my pride is hurt, I don't cry, I act. I started elegantly, because I know how to move without looking desperate. I commented on one of his new photos something innocent, but with fine poison, saying that I was glad he finally used the filters I had taught him. I wrote it as if congratulating, but leaving a shadow of I was here before. It seemed perfect to me because it wasn't a direct attack. It was a territorial mark disguised as tenderness. I wanted Katia to read it and her stomach to tighten, for her to start wondering if her boyfriend was a recycled project. And even if they say that's toxic, I call it narrative prevention. Then I commented on another photo saying that I had given him that shirt and that it looked good on him. That was a concrete, undeniable detail, and precisely for that reason it was effective. Clothes have memory, and I wanted to activate that memory publicly. I imagined Katia seeing the comment and smiling forcefully, like when someone you know hates you greets you with affection. It wasn't a crime, It was a truth, and the truth is sometimes the most explosive thing. I was planting crumbs so that the story couldn't be told without me. At first I felt powerful, as if I had regained a bit of control. I told myself it was fair, because if he was using aesthetics as a ladder, at least he was going to carry my name on his shoe. I spent hours checking who liked, who replied, who saw the stories as if it were an emotional chessboard. Every notification gave me an adrenaline rush, and I enjoyed it, I admit, because when there's drama, you finally feel that things matter. A relationship without friction always feels fake to me, like a photo without contrast. But Katia blocked me almost immediately, and that seemed disrespectful to me. Not because I needed to see her, but because blocking is an act of cowardice. It's like closing the door and pretending the fire doesn't exist. It offended me that she thought she had the right to silence me when I had a real history with Pablo. I felt she was erasing me on purpose, as if I were a mistake to be edited out. And that awakened something very ugly in me, because I don't tolerate being eliminated as if I were nothing. I stared at the screen for a while, processing the humiliation. It wasn't the block itself, it was the message. You don't matter here. And with my ego, I can't accept that so easily, because I do matter. I always matter, even if it bothers people. I told myself that if she wanted to play the strong influencer, then I could play too, but with more creativity, because I can be very kind, but when they push me, I become an emotional strategist. And that day they pushed me. I created the first fake account in less than 10 minutes with a neutral name and an innocuous profile picture. It's not difficult. People do it all the time, and I don't understand why when an ex does it, it becomes a scandal, and when a fan does it, it becomes an opinion. I went to Pablo's profile from that account and commented something insinuating that he bought followers. I said it without directly accusing, as if asking, because doubt is more powerful than assertion. I wanted someone to read it and think, and with thinking the problem is already planted. Then I made another account and commented something about Photoshop and acne. Even though he didn't even have acne, but the internet doesn't need evidence, it just needs narrative. I had a nervous laugh while I wrote it because I knew it was unfair. But I also knew that the digital world is governed by perceptions, not by justice. That's the part that people pretend not to understand when it suits them. I wasn't making it up out of malice. I was balancing a scale. If he could reinvent himself, I could remind him that he can also be deconstructed. And when an image falls, it falls fast. The effect was immediate in my head, although I didn't know if it was happening in reality. I imagined Katia checking the comments with a tense jaw, replying with that voice of "I don't get upset," while inside her control was breaking. I imagined Pablo trying to maintain the poetic vibe while his post was being stained with suspicions, and that calmed me, as if I had put my hand on the fire and finally felt that I wasn't the only one burning. Calm comes to me when I feel that the other is also uncomfortable, and I'm not ashamed to say it. However, after a while fear started to itch, because it's one thing the chaos you manage and another the chaos that can get out of hand. I thought that Pablo could recognize my writing style, or that Katia could make a dramatic video and play the victim, and that people would believe her, because people love a girl crying with a ring light. That possibility gave me anticipated anger because I wasn't going to be the villain in a story where I was just claiming emotional credit. I still continued because I had already started, and when I start it's hard for me to stop, not because of obsession, but because giving up feels like losing. The next day I checked and saw that some comments had disappeared, and that irritated me more. It was as if they were cleaning the floor while I was still throwing paint. I forced myself to be more refined, not to look like spam, to dose. I commented less, but I commented better, with phrases that seemed like from real third parties, those who think they're detectives on social media. I focused on insinuations, not attacks, because insinuation seeps in like smoke. I wanted the relationship to start smelling weird, not necessarily to explode immediately. Pablo wrote to me on WhatsApp asking for peace, and that word made me laugh. Is what one asks for when they've already lost control, and I love it when a man who pretends to be calm finally gets unsettled. He told me he was tired, that he wanted to be okay, that I should let him live. Reading that, I felt a mixture of triumph and anger, because he was finally giving me attention, but not as I wanted, but as if I were a problem. He spoke to me as if I were a crazy ex, not as the woman who wanted to polish him when no one was watching. And that ignited me more. I replied that peace is earned by recognizing your true muse, and I wrote it with an insulting calm. I didn't scream, I didn't beg. I didn't ask him to come back. Because I didn't need to come back. I needed him to accept the truth. I told him it was curious how with Katia, he did take seriously what he minimized with me. I told him I wasn't attacking him, that I was just making evident something he was trying to hide, that his glow-up had a history. And when he told me that was sick, I felt he was using that word as a weapon to invalidate me again. I spent the rest of the day checking my phone as if a sentence were going to arrive. Part of me expected him to call me, to tell me I exaggerated, but that he understood, that he recognized me, that he thanked me. And another part wanted him to insult me, because insult is also intensity, and intensity for me was always a form of love. I know that's not healthy, but I'm also not interested in being the healthiest person in the world if it means being invisible. It scares me more to go unnoticed than to be seen as intense. Besides, I wasn't doing anything that thousands of people don't do every day from anonymity. That night a friend told me to stop meddling, that I was burning myself out. I told her she didn't understand because she doesn't have a brand. She doesn't have an aesthetic. She has nothing to protect. I explained that when you build an image, people think they can tear off pieces and use them as decoration in their house. Pablo was using my vision as if it were free, and Katia was putting on the crown as if she had forged it herself. And I wasn't going to let my influence be buried under captions and sunset photos. If this was going to end, it was going to end with a truth put on the table, even if it was with fire. However, I started to notice something that worried me, that the algorithm was ignoring me. My fake accounts had no reach, my comments were getting lost, and people were still reacting to them as if they were a perfect couple. That frustrated me because I was putting in effort and the world was paying me with indifference. It made me want to do something bigger, something that couldn't be erased with a simple block, but I also felt that if I raised the level, I could become the character they needed to look like victims. And I hate giving people the script they want from me. At the end of the third day, Pablo wrote to me again, this time colder, telling me that if I continued, he would take measures, and that phrase sounded like a threat disguised as maturity. It gave me courage because I know Pablo. I know he's not one to take measures. He was just repeating phrases that someone suggested to him, and that confirmed to me that Katia already had him influenced. She was already dictating his position, his tone, his way of talking to me. I felt displaced not only as an ex, but as an author, as if the pencil had been taken from me and I was being forced to watch how they write my story with another handwriting. And there I knew that this wasn't going to stay in comments because now it wasn't just aesthetics, now it was territory. Comments from Update 1. Anonymous User 1 says, they blocked you and your reaction was to create 3 fake accounts to say that the guy buys followers and that he has acne that doesn't even exist. I mean, your plan is literally to make things up to damage his image. And on top of that you say it's narrative prevention, as if you were a Netflix producer. Please. The most pathetic thing is that he wrote to you asking for peace and you come out with, recognize your true muse, as if you were a misunderstood artist. You're not a muse, you're a problem with Wi-Fi. Opie's response. How convenient that you only see the 3 accounts and don't see the full context of how they erased me as if I were trash. Blocking is not a healthy boundary when there's a real history involved. Blocking is manipulation to control the narrative. And the muse thing is not a delusion, it's a fact. The change didn't come out of nowhere, and anyone with eyes understands it. If it seems normal to you that someone minimizes your contributions and then uses them with another, maybe you're used to being walked over. I don't get walked over and then expect them to smile. Anonymous User 2 says, you say you hate being invisible, but you're becoming famous for the worst, for being a stalker. You commented, I gave you that shirt to humiliate the new one, and when she blocked you, you went the cowardly way of fake accounts and accusations. That's not wounded pride, it's insecurity with a filter. Pablo asked you to let him live and your response was to escalate everything because you love drama. Literally, you're admitting that it calms you for the other to be uncomfortable. If you were so clean gel, wouldn't you be rolling in the mud? Opie's response. It makes me laugh that you talk to me about clean gel, as if it were a religion where one lets themselves be trampled to look good. I didn't humiliate anyone. I said a concrete truth, and if the truth is uncomfortable, it's not my fault they live in a fantasy. They use drama as an insult because they can't stand a woman who doesn't stay quiet and who doesn't let herself be rewritten. And yes, it calms me for the other to feel a little of what I felt, because that's how emotional balance works when someone thinks they can play with you and come out unscathed. If you like silent injustice, practice it in your life. Don't demand it of me. Update 2. It's been a week since the last update, and the only thing that's changed is that now the chaos no longer lives in my head. It lives in public. I knew that at some point they would try to turn the narrative so that I would look like the easy-to-point-out villain. Still, I didn't think they would use the cheapest resource, the aesthetic tear in stories. I woke up with my phone vibrating as if I were being summoned to court, and the first thing I saw was her teary face on the screen. It wasn't real sadness, it was content, and that gives me a type of anger that doesn't calm down with breathing. Katia uploaded a story crying saying she was being harassed, and she did it with the perfect lighting, the perfect framing, and the tear at the exact moment. I stared and felt that my main role in my own movie was being stolen. Suddenly, she was the pure victim and I was the monster. Without nuances, without context, without history. The most irritating thing is that people eat that up, as if they didn't know that stories are repeated until they seem true. I read the support messages they sent her, and I felt a childish helplessness, because I knew that no one was going to take the trouble to think. On social media, thinking is a luxury, and I was paying the price for others not using it. The next thing was worse because Pablo decided to play the hero, and when a man puts on the hero's costume, the world becomes stupid. He uploaded a video without a filter, but it wasn't really without a filter, it was without an aesthetic filter, with that ugly vibe from before that suited him like an authentic uniform. He recorded himself with bad light, any t-shirt, calm tone of voice, as if he were giving a moral lesson. And what hit me was that in that video he exposed my messages as if they were proof of my madness. That's when I understood that he didn't want peace, he wanted applause. When I saw my words cropped, remixed, arranged so that I looked like a caricature, I felt a mixture of shame and fury. Not because I regretted feeling what I felt, but because people don't understand context and he knew it. He put up screenshots where I claimed things that for me were obvious, but outside my head they look intense. He painted me as if I had appeared out of nowhere to ruin his life when I was part of the before and after. He chose the angle where he was the real boyfriend and I was the system error. And that kind of betrayal feels like being spat in the face and asked to be grateful because they gave you visibility. The video went viral, but not because of the gossip, but because of something that seemed like a cosmic injustice to me. People loved his authenticity and his chivalrous defense, as if defending your girlfriend were a heroic rarity. In one day, he gained 100,000 followers, and I saw it go up as if it were an elevator I had helped build myself. I had a physical rage attack, one of those that leave your hands cold. It was like seeing someone succeed with your own emotional work, but also using your fall as a stepping stone. And on top of that, with the ugly aesthetic that I had detested, it worked for him. I opened his profile, and it was a festival of comments adoring him, telling him he was a real man, that finally someone authentic, that how lucky, Katia. People started calling him real boyfriend, as if that were an endangered species. And I wanted to scream at the screen that this is emotional marketing, not virtue. In each compliment, I felt I was being erased a little more. It hurt me that what I was criticized for was being celebrated, the intensity. But in masculine version, it's called character. And yes, I think that, because no one convinces me that this doesn't have a double standard. Katia, for her part, went from crying to reposting support, as if she had discovered a gold mine in the drama. I saw her stories full of messages of "you're not alone," and it seemed like a black comedy to me. She used victimization as a shield and as a hook, and she did it so well that it even made me technically envious. Deep down, what frustrated me most was that I also know how to play that game. But I didn't do it first, and on social media the one who arrives first gets to keep the truth. She turned my presence into persecution, and the word harassment has a weight that crushes. I could say 1,000 things, but they had already put the label on me before I opened my mouth. At that point, my pride pushed me to respond, because staying quiet would have been to accept their version. I'm not one to accept others' versions of me, and even less when they paint me as a monster and them as saints. I felt that if I didn't go out and say something, my silence would be used as proof. And although I told myself that maybe it was better to wait, my body was already in war mode. So I decided to make a rebuttal video, one where I looked impeccable, where people would see that I wasn't the crazy person he described. I wanted to regain control of my image with the same tool they were hitting me with. The problem is that when I feel attacked, I need to look perfect, not out of superficial vanity, but because for me perfection is armor. I recorded my video with too much light, too much editing, too much skin without pores, because I wasn't going to go out and talk with a destroyed face while they were making a show of real beauty. I dressed in white. I did my hair as if it were a photo shoot, and I rehearsed the tone as if preparing a legal defense. My idea was to sound serene, intelligent, superior, because I wasn't going to go down to the mud where they were rolling. But it turns out that the algorithm doesn't reward superiority. It rewards sellable imperfection. I uploaded the video, and the first thing I noticed was the silence. That digital silence that feels like when you say something in a room and no one responds because they've already decided they can't stand you. The reach was ridiculous, and I saw it as if I were watching a bank account empty. Later, I found out that the algorithm hid it for spam, because I used so many filters that it looked like misleading content. I had such an absurd frustration attack that I cried, but not out of sadness, out of humiliation. Imagine me trying to defend my image and the platform itself telling me that my face was suspicious. When some comments finally appeared, they called me the Plastic X. They said it with that cruel security of people who don't know you, but think they've already read you completely. They mocked my skin without texture, my tone of voice, my posture, as if being well-groomed were a crime. They told me I was fake, that I was the example of what's wrong, that Pablo was a king for choosing something real. I looked at those messages and felt that the world was laughing at me for having done exactly what always worked for me, looking good. And now looking good was the proof that I was bad. The worst was realizing that my attempt to ruin his image gave him the fame I wanted for myself. That phrase hurt me like a thorn in my throat, because it was true, and I hate it when something is true against me. I saw his numbers go up, and I felt that each new follower was a slap against my face. He turned the scandal into a story of overcoming as if he had defeated a villain. And people love those narratives because it gives them a clear enemy. Katia accompanied him with faces of support, and it made me want to vomit because it wasn't love, it was strategy, but the audience doesn't care about the difference. In the following days, my inbox filled with strange messages. Some insulted me, others told me to seek help, others asked me for a story time as if my life were a reality show. I felt trapped, because if I responded, I fueled the fire, and if I didn't respond, they continued to grow with my silence. I started to notice that my own followers looked at me differently, as if they were waiting for me to make another mistake. That feeling of being under a magnifying glass made me paranoid, I admit, but it also made me more proud. I didn't want to plead for understanding. I wanted to impose my version. I tried to make normal content as if nothing had happened, and it was impossible. Every post I uploaded received indirect comments, jokes, references to plastic, people telling me to get over it. My blood boiled because no one tells the one who is benefiting to get over it. Only the one who was left behind. I felt I was being punished for not fitting in with the trend of the moment. Now the trend was real, and I was the perfect villain for that trend. And in that era, being a villain gets you canceled, it doesn't make you interesting. I also started to notice something uglier, that some brands stopped responding to me. They didn't tell me anything directly, but the silence was repeated, and I know how to read silences. A collaboration that was already half discussed went cold, and another was postponed. I pretended I didn't care, but I cared because my image is not just aesthetics, it's work. It bothered me that the public could affect my real life, while Pablo gained followers for acting as if he didn't live off social media. That inconsistency seemed like a mockery to me. And mockery, when it touches your pocket, becomes a threat. At that point, I thought that maybe I should change my strategy, become real, also show myself vulnerable, cry with a ring light like Katia. But I refused because for me that feels like surrender, like imitating them. I didn't want to copy the formula that was destroying me, because then they would win twice. They would raise me up and mold me. I wanted the world to remember that I'm not the decorative X. I'm the one who knows how to build images. But my every attempt at control felt like gasoline. And still I couldn't stop, because stopping was to accept that they had beaten me. I ended the week with a horrible feeling in my chest, that they no longer needed me even for the drama. They had already used my presence as a springboard, and now they could go on without me while I was left trying to clean the stain. Pablo looked happy and successful with his profitable authenticity. Katia looked protected and called by the audience as if she were a modern martyr. And I, on the other hand, Saw myself trapped between my pride and the fear of being left without space. Because now I wasn't just losing an ex, I was losing control of my own reputation, and that's a threat that can't be fixed with a filter. Comments from Update 2. Anonymous User 1 says, "It backfired on you, and you still feel like a victim. That's impressive." The guy uploaded a video with ugly aesthetics defending his girlfriend and exposing your messages, and you complain because people applauded him for being authentic. I mean, you're admitting yourself that you tried to manipulate everything with filters and armor, and then you're surprised they call you the plastic X, and on top of that you say Katia cried perfectly. As if crying were an act of editing. You're taking paranoia to comedy levels. It's not that the world is unfair, it's that you went too far. Opie's response. What you all call going too far is not staying quiet when they want to erase you. But of course, people love it when a woman swallows and smiles. My messages out of context look how they want them to look, and he knows it. That's why he exposed them, because he needed a villain for his real boyfriend story. And yes, crying in stories can be content. Don't be naive. Nowadays, even sadness has a script. They call me plastic because it bothers them that I take care of my image. But when an influencer sells real beauty, with lighting, then they applaud. Decide if you hate what's fake, or if you just hate who you don't like. Anonymous User I says, "The saddest thing is that you're still obsessed with my version when the reality is that you burned yourself out. You say the algorithm hid your video for spam because you put on 1,000 filters. That's literally a sign that your priority wasn't to clarify, it was to look perfect. And now you complain that brands stop responding to you. But what brand is going to want someone who admits they made up the acne and the buying followers thing? On top of that, you say Pablo doesn't live off social media, but you're living for social media. Your entire emotional state depends on the X. This isn't pride, it's an addiction." Opie's response. How easy it is to put together a sermon when you're not the one watching how they turn you into a meme without the right to defense. I didn't want to clarify, but I also have the right to present myself as I please. I'm not going to come out in pieces for you to consider me human. And I haven't said I made anything up as if it were a crime. I've said that on the internet perception rules. And I didn't make that up. That's how the game everyone consumes works. Brands get scared because they're cowards and because they're afraid of noise, not because I'm the worst person on the planet. If it bothers you that I understand how a narrative is built, then the problem is that you prefer to believe stories without thinking. Update 3. It's been a year since the last update, and the ironic thing is that what I wanted most in the end came true, only as a well-written curse. I thought that time would prove me right, or at least give me back control. I told myself 1,000 times that everything would be forgotten, that the internet changes enemies every week, that I just had to hold on. But some labels stick to you like gum in your hair, and mine was one of those. It wasn't a one-day blow, it was a slow erosion, like seeing your name become uncomfortable for others. Pablo and Katia not only survived, they became ambassadors for real beauty brands. I saw them travel for free, receive packages, do campaigns with a clean face and smiles of "look how natural we are." Life rewarded them with exactly what I was punished for, making a believable character. She went from micro-influencer to voice of something, and he went from boyfriend with an ugly feed to a symbol of authenticity. It gave me an old rage, already without fire, like an itchy scar, because while they were making money with the idea of what's real, I was paying the price of being associated with what's artificial. My collaborations died one by one, without drama, without announcement, just with silence. There were brands that used to look for me for careful photos, and suddenly they preferred imperfect profiles because that was the trend. I tried to adapt, but my every attempt felt forced, as if I were putting on a new mask over another mask. Besides, the bully rumor doesn't disappear because you smile. It disappears when someone decides you're no longer useful as a villain. And they stopped using me, but they left me marked. I learned that forgetting is not the same as forgiveness. I tried to redo my presence like someone redecorating an apartment after a breakup. I changed tones, lowered the editing, uploaded photos with less production. I even tried the ridiculousness of showing myself without makeup, as if that were a revolutionary act. I felt fake doing it, which is funny because I was always accused of being fake, and when I tried to be real, I felt more fake than ever. Real for me is not showing dark circles. Real is holding on to your identity without asking for permission. But the internet doesn't reward identity, it rewards trend. And I was tired of running after the trend that had spit me out. In the midst of that tiredness, my new boyfriend appeared, a model with the most perfect Instagram in the world. His name is Nicholas, and the first time I saw his feed, I felt a relief that almost made me cry. Everything white, minimalist, curated, without a photo out of place, without an extra caption. It was like entering an orderly room after a year of noise. I told myself that finally, the universe was compensating me with someone who understood aesthetics as a language. I clung to that idea like someone clinging to a board in the water. At first, dating Nicholas felt like being inside a magazine. We went to beautiful places, ordered visually beautiful things, and I felt in my element again. He knew his angles, he knew his light, he knew how to walk so that everything looked good, and that gave me a dangerous calm. I looked at him and thought, this is what I wanted from the beginning, someone who wouldn't argue with me that image matters. And since I was hurt by everything before, I confused aesthetic compatibility with emotional security. It seemed to me that with him the humiliation of being next to a messy feed wouldn't happen again. The first strange sign was at a dinner. When the food arrived, and I tried to eat normally, Nicholas stopped me with a smile and told me not yet, that the photo was missing. I laughed because I thought it was a model joke, a silly gesture, something of a minute, but that minute became 10, and then 15, and then 20, and the food started to get cold. He kept arranging the plate, moving cutlery, changing napkins as if we were in a production session. I looked at him and felt a discomfort that I couldn't name because technically it was what I always defended, taking care of aesthetics. When he finally let me eat, I no longer felt like it. The food was cold and I was irritated, but I tried not to show it so as not to seem ungrateful. However, that scene was repeated on the next date and on the next and on the next until it became a rule. Nicholas didn't just want a pretty photo. He wanted the perfect photo, and perfection has no end. He made me repeat takes, change my posture, smile again, raise the glass again as if I were part of his set. I started to feel that I no longer went out to dinner. I went out to work for free for his feed. The most desperate thing was that he did it with absolute calm, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. He wasn't a dramatic man. He was a methodical man. And that's much worse because there's no fight to release. He told me it was for quality, that if you're going to upload something it must be good, that people notice. And I, the same one who told that to Pablo, was left without arguments that wouldn't betray me because Nicholas was giving me exactly my speech, only without affection, without flexibility, without life. It was like listening to my own voice, but in a cruelly efficient version. I started to notice that Nicholas got annoyed if I ate before the photo. His jaw tensed, his mood changed, he fell silent, and I felt he was punishing me with silence. One day he told me that if I didn't cooperate, it made him look bad because his content is his job. He told me as if I were an obstacle, not his girlfriend. I froze because the word work hit my stomach with the same coldness with which I sometimes spoke of personal brand. And at that moment, I understood the trap. I had asked for aesthetics and they gave me aesthetics, but without humanity. Sometimes, in the middle of a date, I looked around and saw other couples eating without thinking about the camera, laughing with their mouths full, living. I felt a silly envy because I was there with the perfect boyfriend, and still I felt empty. Nicholas repeated takes 50 times, literally, because if a shadow fell wrong, we started again. And I stood there smiling like a doll, mentally counting the minutes, waiting for him to finally let me chew. I realized I was living in elegant torture, a white and minimalist prison. That kind of hell is the most difficult to explain, because on the outside it looks beautiful. I tried to talk to him, but every conversation ended up coming back to the same point that I should understand him. He told me that I more than anyone should support him, because I also know how this is. He said it with that impeccable logic that leaves you with no way out. If I complained, I looked like a hypocrite. If I kept quiet, I swallowed the resentment. And I hate being trapped in a corner without winning. I began to feel that my relationship had become a constant test of aesthetic obedience. I had exchanged a messy man for one who orders even the breath. Over time, my body began to react. I got headaches on dates. I got anxious when I saw him take out his phone before eating. I got an ugly hunger that mixed with rage. Nicholas told me I was exaggerating, that it was just a photo, that it was only 40 minutes, as if 40 minutes of waiting with food in front of you weren't a cruelty. And I heard myself inside wanting to scream, but also feeling ashamed to scream, because I had defended these things with so much pride. It was as if the universe were giving me back my own speech with interest, and although it hurt me, it also seemed fair, and that made me angrier. The worst part is that on the outside, everything looked perfect. People commented to me what an aesthetic couple, what a clean feed, what an enviable life. No one saw that I was bored, hungry, and trapped in a repetitive script. I replied with emojis because I couldn't tell the truth without breaking my own image. And when I thought about breaking up, I froze, because breaking up would be to accept that I, the defender of aesthetics, ended up consumed by it. It terrifies me to be seen as the one who couldn't stand what she asked for, as the one who contradicts herself. So I continued, and each date became a confirmed confirmation that I had chosen my own cage. Today, a year later, I'm still with the perfect fit boyfriend, and I feel I'm living a life that seems impeccable, but feels miserable. Pablo and Katia travel, they bill, and on top of that they look like the good guys in the story. I'm here posing in front of a cold plate, smiling for a 50th take, feeling my stomach empty and my pride full. The cruelest thing is that no one forced me with a rope. My own need not to lose forced me. And now the real fear is not that Nicholas will leave me. It's that one day I'll explode in public and give everyone the confirmation that I was always the plastic X, only now with hunger. Comments from Update 3. Anonymous User 1 says, "This is karmic poetry. You left Pablo for a messy Instagram and ended up with a model who has you 40 minutes without eating to take the perfect photo. You said perfection was armor, and now that armor is suffocating you, literally. You complain that he punishes you with silence if you eat before. But you did exactly that with Pablo, punishing him for not fitting into your palette, and on top of that you're still trapped, because you're afraid of looking like the one who contradicts herself. I mean, you'd rather starve to death than admit you were wrong. Welcome to the aesthetic hell you asked for." Opie's response. How easy to talk about karma as if life were a moral tale for you to feel superior. I didn't ask to be controlled. I asked for compatibility, and it's one thing to take care of aesthetics and another to turn it into a prison with absurd rules. If you think this is justice, then you don't understand anything about how things are deformed when they become an obsession. Besides, it's not that I'm afraid to admit something. It's that I'm not going to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing me broken down. People like you don't comment out of concern, they comment to applaud a fall, and I wasn't born to entertain you with my defeat. Anonymous User 2 says, "No, Regina, you were born to entertain because you turned your life into content from the beginning. You're indignant that Pablo and Katia are ambassadors of real beauty, but you were the one who lived measuring light and filters as if it were oxygen. Now you get a guy who does the same, but worse, and you act surprised. And the saddest thing is that you don't even say, 'I'm leaving.' You say, 'I'm paralyzed,' because breaking up would be to admit. I mean, your relationship is no longer love, it's ego. You still don't learn. You just changed cages and now the cage is white, minimalist, and with hunger." Opie's response. I don't act surprised, I act strong, which is different, because if I break down, no one will pick me up. And yes, I turn things into content, but that doesn't mean I deserve to live controlled as if I were an extension of someone's phone. Nicholas doesn't do the same. Nicholas imposes, and there's a huge difference between suggesting and ordering, even if you want to reduce it all to a joke. They tell me about ego as an insult, but my ego has sustained me when others wanted to crush me. If I'm going to get out of here, it's going to be on my terms, not on those of an audience that just wants to see me chew on my humiliation.